Well, you never know what the Lord has given to some one person that might be just the key to helping the person that you love. And so Scott's going to be talking today about that key that unlocks the Jehovah's Witness mind. Scott is a Christian who has been involved in countercult ministry and apologetics since 1994. He is a founder and director of Defending Your Doorstep Ministries, and of course when he had the introduction, he told us about your website as well. So we're very pleased and honored to have Scott come and speak to us this afternoon on the key that unlocks the Jehovah's Witness mind. Scott?
As I mentioned earlier, I began investigating. I'm not going to take you through my whole spiritual journey, but I began to investigate the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society in about 1994. And I read things that were both from the organization and things that were critical of the organization. And when one does that, one necessarily comes over a few names over and over again and a few events over and over again. And a pair of names that came up over and over again was Bill and Joan Centenar. And one of the events that came up over and over again was this event. And so this is actually when Joan invited me last winter, it was pretty surreal for me. I mean, this is a dream come true. When I say that, I honestly mean it. I am just thrilled. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for being here and allowing me to speak to you. We have a ministry, as I mentioned earlier, that is an outreach to Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. And as we set this thing up, we had to, actually, even before it was set up, I realized that I had to answer a very, very specific question. And that specific question was, why is it that, I'm sorry, I got to get that clicker. Is the clicker here? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Oh, wait, you might get a praise chorus on your next slide.
That's all right. We get a praise chorus. You notice kind of the contradictions, trumpet of God, unlocking the mind. You'll see how that plays together here in a minute. But we asked a very simple question, is what was the problem? Why is it that Christians had such a difficult time sharing the gospel successfully with Jehovah's Witnesses? What's the problem? Well, we realized that there were really, as we started to look into it, realized that there were really three main obstacles that prevent Christians from effectively reaching Jehovah's Witnesses. The first was, whoa, can we back up? There we go. The first was ignorance. Not only what Jehovah's Witnesses believed, but what Christians believed. Not so much what they believed, but why they believed it. So, from the Jehovah's Witness, or from the Christian standpoint, as they looked at the Jehovah's Witness, they had very little understanding of what they believed. If you asked a Christian what a Jehovah's Witness believed, I'd say 9 times out of 10 you wouldn't get a really good answer. And more often than not, what they would tell you is something of their incidental doctrine. They don't believe in blood transfusions, they don't go to war, they don't celebrate holidays, things like that. But very few would actually articulate anything that was relevant to essential Christian doctrine. Deity of Christ, personality of the Holy Spirit, anything like that. They didn't know those differences. So that was a problem. And we realized, well, we have to educate people, number one, on what Jehovah's Witnesses believe. But also, very few Christians knew why they believed what they believed. I mean, every Christian, if you had 100 Christians in a room, 100 Christians could tell you what they believed. Far fewer could tell you why they believed it. All too often, what they would do is, if you pressed them, they would fall into they'd go backwards and backwards and backwards into some type of subjective answer. Like, well, that's just what I was taught. That's what my church says. But very few could whip out a Bible and say, well, here's why. John 1:1 says this. John 8:58 says this. This is why. So we realized, well, we have to solve that second problem there too. We had to train Christians to understand what the Bible actually taught and how it taught it. Now that was really only, that was really only the first problem, solving the first problem. Because then we realized that there was another problem, a communication problem. Quite simply, we speak different languages, don't we? I mean, you all know that, but most Christians didn't. And most Christians didn't. Come back. Why are you going away from me? There we go. All right. Most Christians didn't because they didn't realize that they were speaking a different language because some of the words actually sounded the same. They just mean different things. And so we had very well-educated Christians and Christians that took the time to learn what Jehovah's Witnesses believed and that could articulate Christian doctrine effectively, but were still struggling, and it was primarily because they weren't covering this communication gap. And as God does say that His word will not return to Him empty, that it will accomplish its purpose, the gospel message God has made sure is not just some magic word or phrase like abracadabra or hocus pocus, right? That turns the frog into the prince or the non-Christian into a Christian. It's something that must be heard and understood in order to be considered, which is a big part of what Pentecost was all about, actually. Allowing God to reach people that He otherwise could, or changing languages, allowing people to speak languages they didn't normally speak so that God could reach people He wanted them to reach. So we needed to follow that. We needed to do what God had done and basically change the language of Christians so that they could effectively reach Jehovah's Witnesses. And so we had to teach them, if you will, to speak Jehovah's Witness and to effectively communicate with them. And so we set out and set forward to do that. And I think we did it relatively effectively, but there was still yet another problem. And that other problem was what I want to talk to you today about which I want to talk to you today. Let's do that. And that is the fortress. Because I believe that the individual Jehovah's Witness has had a fortress built around their mind by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. And that fortress surrounds their mind so that it is exceptionally difficult to reach the Jehovah's Witness. And what I mean by that is this. We all understand, or many of us do anyway, and maybe you're just kind of beginning on your journey and being able to reach out to Jehovah's Witnesses. But a lot of us understand that Jehovah's Witness doctrine is extremely susceptible to the Bible. Okay, we all understand the Bible just doesn't teach it. I mean, the Bible doesn't teach that Jesus is Michael. It doesn't teach salvation by works. It doesn't teach that the Holy Spirit is a force. Quite the opposite. So why is it that we can train people to speak the language, we can train people in biblical doctrine, they can't just walk in or have a Jehovah's Witness in their house, go from doctrine to doctrine with the Bible verses, and have a Jehovah's Witness fall to their knees and accept Jesus Christ right in their living room? I mean, if you think it through, it should happen. The problem is this fortress. What has happened is the Watchtower has all these vulnerable doctrine, but they've placed them inside this wall. And so what we as Christians do is we kind of go, we see them coming. We kind of run up there with our Bible verses. We start to go at them. This is, my PowerPoint's kind of jacked up right now, so deal with it. We kind of go at them, but we start flinging rocks and we're just hitting the walls. We're not even reaching them. And so it's a major problem in that we think we're doing the right thing, but the reality is our assault isn't getting through. And that was the trick that we really realized that we had to solve, the problem that we really had to solve. Because these doctrines are vulnerable, okay? And the thing about the way the human mind is that if you build a wall around it, they're invulnerable. If that wall is justification. And that's what the wall is here with the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. It's justification. Not justification in the biblical sense. Justification in the making an excuse sense. The rationalization sense. People will hold on to some of the most absurd, ridiculous, unbiblical beliefs if they want to and if they can justify it. They have to be able to justify it. Not just wanting to will really do it, and I'll explain that in a minute. But if they can justify it, any belief can be held on to.